After suggesting that people drink bleach to cure them of COVID, President Trump has courted controversy again, this time linking paracetamol and vaccines to autism in children.
The Telegraph science correspondent Joe Pinkstone joins us to debunk some of the myths.
The MHRA, the medical regulator in the UK, and the European Medical Agency that dictate the European side of things, they are very clear that there is no link between paracetamol and autism. And they say that if there is the miscommunication and then women become too afraid or worried about taking paracetamol during pregnancy, they will then fill that void because the pain is not going to go away, and they will fill it with worse alternatives that are more harmful to their health and to that of their child.
Now, Tim, as a follower of all things American and a Pepto-Bismol taker like myself, if I said Tylenol to you, what would that mean?
I know that it's an American brand painkiller.
Yes.
I don't know what's in it. If I go to America, I just pile up on Advil PM.
Oh, do you?
But I've never tried. Advil PM's amazing.
What is
if you
it?
want a good night's sleep.
Oh, is it?
Not only do you not feel pain, you don't feel anything.
Oh,
you
wow.
barely feel alive.
Okay, can you give me some of those
Combine it with a
later?
glass of whiskey and it's better than a general anaesthetic. But Tylenol, I'm unfamiliar with.
It's paracetamol, basically. It's just the brand name in America for paracetamol. And we're speaking about this because we had, in the scale of outrageous press conferences, Trump always scores highly, let's be honest. But this one was particularly interesting. It featured the president, it featured his health secretary and all-round health guru, Robert Kennedy Jr., and this is what was discussed.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of acetaminophen, is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol, during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good. For this reason, they are strongly recommending that women limit Tylenol use during pregnancy unless medically necessary.
There we have the President of the United States advising pregnant women on how to handle pain. We'll get into the scientific evidence with regards to paracetamol and pregnancy in a moment, but Trump also speculated that childhood vaccines could be a cause of autism, which echoes a narrative among some of his supporters, most notably Robert Kennedy Jr., that there is a link between inoculations and autism.
The MMR, I think, should be taken separately. This is based on what I feel, the mumps, measles, and all the three should be taken separately. And it seems to be that when you mix them, there could be a problem. So there's no downside in taking them separately. In fact, they think it's better, so let it be separate. The chicken pox is already separate because when that got mixed in, I guess they made it for a while, it really was bad. So they make chicken pox. Individually, they're okay. When you mix them, something maybe happens. So there's no downside in doing it. It's not like, if you do it, bad things. No, it's only good side. And it may not have that much of an impact, but it may have a big impact. So let those be taken separately. And then hepatitis B is sexually transmitted. There's no reason to give a baby that's almost just born hepatitis B. So I would say wait till the baby is 12 years old and formed and take hepatitis B. And I think if you do those things, it's going to be a whole different, it's going to be a revolution in a positive sense.
So that's the verdict of someone with no medical training whatsoever. Let's hear from a doctor on it, Paul Offit, who's a leading US paediatrician and vaccine researcher. He's actually appeared on the Daily Tea. He's called this moment the most dangerously irresponsible press conference in the realm of public health in American history, which is saying something because, of course, President Trump did once advocate drinking bleach to get rid of COVID. Our own Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has waded in. He was speaking on ITV this morning, and he said people should ignore anything that Donald Trump is saying and keep taking paracetamol.
We are joined by Joe Pinkstone, Telegraph science correspondent. Joe, tell us, what evidence is there of a link between paracetamol and autism?
So the president, his team put out a fact sheet yesterday accompanying the press conference, and it's important to know that they cited 6 studies in that came from US organisations, including Mount Sinai, Johns Hopkins University, and Harvard, amongst them.
Okay, respectable
Organisations, respectable scientists, peer-reviewed papers published in journals, which on the face of it found the findings would support what we heard from President Donald Trump. But it's important to note that not everything on this topic was included in that fact sheet, and also seemingly did not make it into the briefing for the press conference.
Okay.
So the studies were often based on associations and not causal. So therefore there was some kind of a link between paracetamol taken by pregnant women and the children having some kind of autism, ADHD, or intellectual disability. So that's the science that they purport to support the claim. But it's important that we say the consensus outside of Donald Trump's administration does disagree with him. It states that paracetamol is completely fine to take for pregnant women, and that there are no risks when it comes to autism in the baby.
There's been this Swedish study. It was carried out last year. It debunked the link between 1995 and 2019. It interviewed 2.4 million children, or at least assessed the data of 2.4 million children, and it found no link at all between paracetamol use during pregnancy and autism, ADHD, and, as you say, Joe, intellectual disability. I mean, so there's, to be fair, without completely sort of traducing what Trump and RFK Jr. are saying, there are some people who agree and some people who disagree, but you're saying that the general consensus is disagree.
Yes, I think that's a fair reading of the current data. So, for example, in the Swedish study, which British scientists, Irish scientists have said is the best study that looked at this. It looked at, like you say, over 20 years of data, and out of the 2.4 million, there was 186,000 children who were born to mothers who took paracetamol while they were pregnant. So you have a vast data set, and then they compared those children with their siblings when their mother was not taking paracetamol. And that's it sounds quite tedious, but that's a really key distinction, because then what you factor into the statistics are genetics. And we know that autism does have a genetic underlying, and it's driven by genetics and environmental factors. But when you factor that in, there was no difference at all. There was no increased risk. So the raw figures were that 1.33% of those exposed to paracetamol in the womb developed autism within the first 10 years of their life. This was compared to 1.53 in those not exposed.
Wow.
But when you factored in the sibling genetic factor, that completely disappeared, and there was no link at all. And the scientists said, quote, "We did not see any increased risk of ADHD, autism, or intellectual disability."
Right.
So their findings are fairly comprehensive, and have been the ones that the British scientists that I've spoken to have said, this is the one that we look at as the closest to the truth that we can see.
This is what confuses me.
Mm-hmm.
How can the Swedish study say that, but the president is able to quote American studies that he says indicate the opposite?
It's just a great point, and you fundamentally go back to how science is done, and there are very different ways of conducting studies. So for the Harvard study, for example, it looked at associations. It looked at a link between, is there a connection between this and that? And they found that there was, but it did not, and they said themselves that we should not draw causal links between this. And the Swedish study, the genetic element of the sibling analysis is really key in able to get rid of the confounding factors that were not taken into account in many of the US studies that were cited by the Trump administration.
So where are we in this country on the MMR and links to autism? Because the claims made by Dr. Andrew Wakefield, which created a real storm, posed questions about Tony and Sherry Blair and whether they had vaccinated their children and all sorts, sparked a surge in requests for separate MMR vaccines as opposed to the combined dose. The fashion has always been, and this is how my children were inoculated, to have the combined, because we felt that Wakefield's research was completely debunked.
Yes, and that it is debunked. It is completely true that there is no link between autism and the MMR jab. In fact, in this country now, before I came on, I was speaking to a scientist involved in these sort of decisions. You cannot get the MMR vaccine separately. They are simply not manufactured. So for measles, mumps and rubella, the only way that you can get vaccinated against them on the NHS is to go with the MMR jab. And in January, that will be combined with the chickenpox jab of the varicella vaccine. So there is no link between the MMR jab and autism. That has been debunked following the Andrew Wakefield misinformation saga that came out of that time. But the confused messaging, I think, from Donald Trump during his press conference around taking the vaccine separately, perhaps he was meaning to talk about the MMR and the chickenpox vaccine separately.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
there is a connection between when you add the chickenpox vaccine onto the MMR jab, which the UK is doing as of January, you do increase the risk of a medical condition. I believe it's like a fit. It's like a febrile episode that occurs in 1 in every 2,300 children that have this vaccine. You have an extra case of this. So there is a valid medical argument and discussion to be had over the increased risk of that, but there is no link at all.
Because vaccines do have, in small numbers of cases, side effects.
Yes.
I mean, we know why we're here, right? We're here because the incidence of people presenting with autism is up dramatically.
Yes.
And we're trying to figure out why this has happened. And what people like Robert F. Kennedy have wanted to explore is the link between increased pharmaceuticals use. Because we're asking ourselves, what do we do differently 30 or 40 years ago when it comes to raising kids? And one argument is, well, one thing we do is we give them a lot more pharmaceuticals than we used to do, which are, by the way, not just given to them, because I'm going to sound like a crank, but it's true. They're not just given to them out of the kindness of the drug companies' hearts. Pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars every year out of giving stuff to kids. Is it therefore unreasonable, and I suspect it isn't because apparently John Hopkins and Harvard have been looking into it, is it unreasonable to explore if there might be a link between pharmaceuticals and this increase in autism?
No, I think it would be irresponsible not to explore these concerns. And
Right.
I think part of the role of scientists and science as a concept is to do that. I think what we need to make sure we're doing is listening to the findings and the right findings on that. It would be remiss of research organisations not to look at these links, or any potential links for that matter. But the autism, the rise in autism cases is fairly well explained by awareness and reducing of stigma and the widening of symptoms and the lowering of the bar for an autism diagnosis.
Yes.
That's what that side of the argument do say. And you get to a question of what is the true prevalence of autism in the population. The estimate's 1 to 3%. But with the rising cases, I mean, I found some stats not so long ago that since 2019, there is now a 13-fold increase of the wait list for people in the UK on the NHS waiting for an autism diagnosis. That's an enormous increase. The meteoric rise that Donald Trump spoke about is true, and we're seeing that over here. The question is it new autism cases that we didn't see decades ago?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or are we diagnosing cases that were missed?
Well, we could
decades
also
ago?
say
Or,
this.
Kennedy would say it might be that there are more cases,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
they're
but then
coming from an environmental or a toxic base.
Kennedy is sometimes also coming out with just statements that are factually untrue. Oh, the Amish don't have any vaccines and take any drugs, and there are no autistic Amish. To which the Amish community replied, "No, some of us are autistic." You know, I agree with what Joe's saying. I think this is down to increased prevalence and awareness. I do think that social media has played a part, and in this way. If children are thinking, I feel a bit different, my brother was dyslexic. At the time we were at school in the 80s and 90s, he was considered stupid, he
Yeah.
was stigmatised, why can't he read, why can't he write? It's actually gone on to have a phenomenally successful career, and was extremely adept at IT and computers and all the rest of it. My parents sort of pushed through that pain barrier, managed to get the school to kind of recognise that he needed some help. But it was rare as hen's teeth to even come out with saying, my son's got dyslexia and all the rest of it. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, people who had autism would have tried to hide it, would have been considered, socially awkward and difficult. The children themselves, because they're exposed to this online, I genuinely think this, are then saying to their parents, I want to be checked out. The parents who are exposed to it online are then saying, I want you to be checked out.
Yes.
Yes, has that also led to a flurry of overdiagnosis and people saying things like they have OCD when really they're just wanting to be tidy, or they have ADHD when sometimes they lack focus. All of these things are on a spectrum. For some people, it's severe. For some people, it's extremely mild. Does every child with any of these conditions need to be medicalised? Possibly not. But we've become more demanding as a society. You know, in the 1960s, you had a headache and you took a paracetamol to keep the theme up. These days, people are demanding MRI scans. It's just the way that the world works. Should the president be making these statements is my question.
He shouldn't reach conclusions, but I think it's very reasonable for him to ask questions. I have noticed around autism, people don't want to discuss it, partly because it involves kids. And people think and assume that if you ask questions like, is this about overdiagnosis, you're saying, I think you're making it up.
Yeah, I don't believe you.
And that's absolutely not what we're doing. And I will add for the record that there is autism in my family. I understand it better than I used to, and I respect it as a diagnosis. It's a thing. It is an actual physical thing, right?
Is,
We
yeah.
can observe it in the brain. We know it's real. But partly because of this oversensitivity, because the establishment shuts down every discussion of it, like you heard Wes Streeting do. And as I said, Wes Streeting's not a doctor. Don't come to you're a health secretary, okay, but you're not like this godlike word on what is right or wrong. Because the establishment shuts everything down, that welcomes lunatics to fill the vacuum. Because the only place where you, well, not the only place, but one place where you will hear discussion of this is among the far right. So where are people going to pick up their information from about vaccines, etc.? They're going to get it from bad sources because we're reluctant to have the conversation. I also feel that some of what we describe as autism is part of the spectrum of human behavior. I feel that if I had been born 20 years later with my personality when I was a teenager, I would have been diagnosed as autistic. I couldn't look you in the eye. I was totally introverted. I couldn't express all these sorts of problems. I don't have that now.
No.
So what is this condition that you
matured.
grow out of?
Yes, I know.
Or is it something to do with being a human being?
Can I say, though, as a mum of three, the difficulty when you're pregnant, and I think that this is a problem at a state level, is the mixed messaging and advice. I had my first child and I was told to wean the child at 4 months. I had the second child 20 months later and was told to wean it at 6 months. I was
Right.
given a list of things I could do and then I couldn't do. In this whole health space and sphere, there's contradictory advice coming in the whole time. And that's why I think a president of the United States has to show a degree of responsibility because you're actually blinding people who do not have medical knowledge, i.e. the public,
Yes.
with a load of information and you don't know which way is up. Joe, final thought on this from
My
you?
final thought would be that in the UK, the people I would listen to the most would be the JCVI when it comes to the vaccine question.
Yes.
So on
the
the hepatitis
JCVI, the
Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation,
yes.
from memory. I would listen to them when it comes to the spacing of any hepatitis B or any MMR and MMRV vaccines. I would also advocate for you to make your own concerns heard by people treating you, any nurses, any doctors, and raise your concerns and don't be afraid to have the conversation because, like we said, if you don't fill that void, misinformation will fill it for you. And it's worth noting that the MHRA, the medical regulator in the UK, and the European Medical Agency that dictate the European side of things, they are very clear that there is no link between paracetamol and autism. And they say that if there is the miscommunication and then women become too afraid or worried about taking paracetamol during pregnancy, they will then fill that void because the pain is not going to go away and they will fill it with worse alternatives that are more harmful to their health and to that of their child. So there is that element of this as well. It's not quite as simple as paracetamol or nothing, of course.
Very good. When my mother has a pain condition, we last went to see a specialist. She asked him a series of questions. Could it be caused by this, this, and this? And the specialist looked at her with the most patronising smile and said, I can see you've been reading things online. As though she was supposed to sit in a room
Yes.
and suffer and not investigate it for herself. And I do feel that some of this discussion around vaccines and painkillers, I feel an element of that the medical profession is saying, just take the stuff and don't ask questions.
Yes.
I don't blame people for asking questions.
Can I also just send a message out to women in labour everywhere. If you're only offered paracetamol, ask for more drugs.
Backup drugs.
I do recommend pethidrin as a lifestyle choice when you're in that 10 centimetres dilated state. Joe Pinkstone, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.